Welcome to the premiere of This Week in Sports, where we analyze the latest and greatest things sports. I am your host, Sarah Parody, alongside Casey Bryant and Matt McNamara. Tonight we will be talking about Week 9 in the NFL season and the opening week of the NBA season and the World Series. We'll be starting with the NFL season. The Patriots beat the Broncos by a wide margin of 43-21. Matt, what was your reaction on this game?
I was extremely surprised by what was going on during this game. I did not expect such a slow start for the Broncos. And usually, I didn't expect this because the last two games against the Patriots, they've been much stronger offensively, especially to start out. I mean, Manning was playing like Peyton Manning except for the 2 interceptions, but the rest of the team just completely folded completely. It was just a nightmare for that team. And Brady went off and the entire team. The rushing wasn't that good, but the rest of their team, their defense and their offense were all clicking on different cylinders. So I think I was just very surprised at the wide margin of victory, as you said before. It was very surprising for me.
Yeah, given the fact that Manning and the Broncos are usually able to set the pace for the rest of the game right from the get-go, it was very surprising to see that the Patriots just dominated the pace of the game throughout the entire first half and through the rest of the game. It really set the tone. But in retrospect, it kind of makes sense the way that things fell the way they did because Peyton Manning does typically struggle in cold weather, especially in Foxborough. The Patriots have really had Manning's number when he comes there in the winter. They made such a big deal that there was a blizzard going on before the game in Foxborough. So, it kind of goes back to the fact that Manning doesn't really play well in cold temperatures. I mean, the one way that you're going to beat the New England Patriots anyway is through the run game. And the Broncos are just such a one-dimensional team. They're only going to beat you through the air. They only rushed for 43 yards through the entire game. The only way that you're going to beat the Patriots is on the ground because the Patriots do have the #1 pass defense in the entire league. And when you don't have that rushing weapon, you're not going to be able to beat the New England Patriots, not the way that they're playing.
No, and it was just a very lopsided victory in general, especially in that first half. The Broncos had the lead for the first, and they just gave it up in the second quarter, and it just was no turning back from there at all.
And the other thing it harkens back to is the fact that, the way that you're going to be able to beat the Broncos is on the ground. Or excuse me, it's through the air. But really, the New England Patriots are a strictly pass team, much like the Denver Broncos. So the fact that they're able to pass the ball and pick apart a sort of faltering secondary for the Denver Broncos, I mean, that's the way that you're going to beat them. And the fact that they can rely on Tom Brady being Tom Brady. Rob Gronkowski, 9 catches for 107 yards. Edelman, 9 catches, 89 yards. He's able to spread the wealth so well. I mean, it just shows that the Patriots were just better matched up, really, for this
And
game.
their special teams, they had 3 field goals and that punt return from Julian Edelman. So they just played very well overall in that front, and that helped them as well.
Because of how the Patriots played, what are your thoughts on Super Bowl odds? What matchup would you guys predict right now?
I'm not sure if I would exactly put the Patriots in the Super Bowl right now. I'm thinking more, and this is a surprise for me even too, but based on the way the playoffs have been going on, I think a Steelers-Eagles matchup might be working out. Okay. Despite the fact that Foles has been out, he might be able to come back by the time they're in the playoffs, and once they do, they might start off in the wild card, but they might start off with a better, and plus Big Ben has just been going off, and their Steelers have been playing the way the Steelers need to. And with the Eagles, it's just if McCoy keeps playing the way he's playing, solid on the rush and the receiving, I think the Eagles have a very good shot at making the Super Bowl.
I would say the Patriots have a very good shot at being in the Super Bowl, if only just because of their home dominance, really. Since 2001, when they get an 8-plus point lead on a team, they are 84-0. The Patriots absolutely dominate at Gillette Stadium, so I would say that if they're able to secure a higher seed, I think it's no question that the Patriots are a threat to go to the Super Bowl, as they are every year, really. They're a perennial contender. The other team I would say to look for from the NFC would be the Arizona Cardinals. But the one thing that the Cardinals have to be wary of is the fact that they have very stiff competition coming up. They have Detroit, they have the Seahawks twice, they have San Francisco, they have Kansas City. So now that they're playing some of these tougher teams, I think that's really going to be a sort of pre-test, really, for the playoffs. If they're able to hold their own against some of these more competitive teams, I think the Arizona Cardinals could prove themselves to be legitimate contenders.
It's just with the Cardinals, there is a playoff inexperience there as well, and just a lot of their pass defense hasn't been well, but if they can improve that and really, make it through the playoffs in a comfortable way, I think they have a very good shot at making the Super Bowl as well.
Casey, because you said that you felt that the Patriots might make their way into the Super Bowl, do you think that Tom Brady has a chance to be at the MVP?
I'd say you have to say that Brady is the MVP at this point, especially considering where the team was at the start of the year. The Patriots were not the same team 5 weeks ago that they are now. Because you look at the team that got shelled by the Kansas City Chiefs. They looked all over the map, and Brady was throwing to receivers that were not on the same page as him. The defense was faltering. Now, all of a sudden, through either the leadership of Brady or just leading by example, Brady has single-handedly taken control of this offense, and now Gronkowski is settled back in after having an injury. Edelman looks so much more comfortable out there on the receiving core. I would say that you have to give it to Tom Brady.
Yeah, and Tom, definitely with the way Tom Brady's been playing this year, it's just been phenomenal. But you also have to think, the MVP is based off of your talents and how much you win. And if the Patriots can win this much, he'll definitely have a better shot. But also, a lot of people have been talking about Phillip Rivers for the MVP thing, but I'm not quite sure because of the way he's struggled recently. Last week, he had no touchdowns and 3 interceptions, and the Chargers have just been struggling in general. And if he can't get them into the playoffs, there's no way he's going to win the MVP. And if he keeps turning the ball over like he does, there's no way he's going to win the MVP either. So I think it definitely goes to Brady.
And definitely, as Casey brought up, what about the shutout in Miami?
I was very surprised by that. I mean, for a Chargers team that usually relies on offense, they were just completely shut down by Miami. There was no passing, as I said before. The running game didn't exist either. With that, Ryan Matthews certainly didn't help. Phillip Rivers was sacked 4 times. They had 4 turnovers, and they got ambushed on the defense. If they play like they did, there's no way they're making the playoffs, especially with the rest of their schedule against teams like the Chiefs and the Broncos in their own conference. It was just dreadful for them, and they need to really start to hit the panic button because their schedule is not getting any easier from this point on.
Absolutely. I think this is a case merely of reality setting in for the San Diego Chargers, because when they were on their, hot start, they started off the year 5-1, they were beating up on teams like Oakland, like the Jets, like Jacksonville. Now all of a sudden they start to play the more competitive teams like Miami. Granted, Miami is not necessarily a powerhouse, but they're still far more competitive than some of these bottom of the barrel teams. Now that they're actually starting to play teams that can, compete with them, you're starting to see the Chargers falter. And I think a lot of that falls squarely on the shoulders of Phillip Rivers.
That is true.
I think the fact that Rivers, is not taking control of the offense, he's not setting the pace, he's getting picked off a whole lot more, he's just far more fallible than he was before. And that's because before, he looked good because the other teams were making him look good.
Yeah. Definitely. And also with the Chargers, you got to think, the only thing that they're going to need to make it to the playoffs is Phillip Rivers' miracle runs that he seems to have every single December. Otherwise, I really don't give them any playoff shot.
If they can't beat the Rams next week, who are coming off of a win over the Seattle Seahawks, if they can't beat the Rams, I would say they can kiss the playoffs goodbye.
How are they supposed to beat the Broncos and the Patriots and the Ravens consecutively? If they can't beat the Rams or the Raiders.
Coming off a 4-game skid, no question.
So they really just need to focus their efforts more on winning.
And as you guys brought up, speaking of the panic button, the Eagles have just lost their quarterback, Nick Foles. How do you guys feel with Sanchez stepping in?
I mean, I think for the first game he did pretty well. I mean, he came off the bench. He hadn't played in a while. He completed most of his passes. There were a few mistakes here and there, but that's typical for any quarterback coming off the bench. He had over 200 yards, which even as a starter for the New York Jets, he didn't seem to have that often. And he did take advantage of his receivers. Macklin was outstanding, over 160 yards for Macklin. And yes, the Texans do have a horrible pass defense, but Sanchez still impressed. So if they're going to keep going out, they have to make sure Sanchez at least has a few mistakes, like very few mistakes from him, and then McCoy has to step up, and their defense needs to step up because they've been doing okay, but they're going to be playing a lot of good offensive teams like Dallas and Green Bay. So if they can step up defensively and make sure McCoy and Sanchez are doing well, then I think they'll still have a very good shot at the playoffs.
The one thing I saw from Mark Sanchez, which I never really saw when he was on the Jets, was confidence. He looked like a completely new quarterback standing in the pocket. He didn't have the happy feet. He wasn't forced into bad decisions. He wasn't scrambling around. He was able to settle in, find his target, and use an actually pretty strong arm, which really wasn't really showcased during his time with the Jets because he felt so pressured. It's clear that the pressures of New York and the constant pressures of whether or not he should be starting, it's clear that got to him. Now all of a sudden he's thrust into a game. He has no time to think about anything. It's just purely running on adrenaline. He's being thrown in there. All of a sudden, he looks like a competent quarterback. I think it's really more of an eye-opening experience, the fact that Mark Sanchez is a competent quarterback. I mean, he's not the laughingstock we all thought he was with the Jets. He's not that. No one is as bad as they look.
When they're on the Jets.
Of course. I mean, you look at Sanchez's numbers. He had 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, and really, neither one of the interceptions was his fault. The first interception, I believe, hit off the chest of Macklin, and it just deflected off of him and into the defender's arm. That's really nothing that Sanchez can do. The second interception was merely that Riley Cooper didn't button hook as quickly as he should have, and that's really just a receiver and a quarterback not being on the same page from the quarterback not starting as often. So really, that's not something that's a mental lapse from Mark Sanchez. So the one thing that we saw from him was confidence. So I would say that going down the line, given that Nick Foles is going to be out for probably 2 months, I would say Sanchez could absolutely pick up a few wins for them.
He definitely has the potential just to, as he said before, stay confident, stay calm, make as few mistakes as possible, and I feel like the Eagles will have a good run.
All right, well, we will be right back with our next segment. The 2014 NBA season opened up this past week. Looking at the Oklahoma City Thunder injuries, Casey, what do you think? Is their season in trouble?
I would say it's a little too early, especially just given that it's the first week, to start really throwing up the red flag for the Oklahoma City Thunder. But, that being said, you can't just toss away the fact that they're going to be missing key players, star players really. Kevin Durant, they're going to be missing Russell Westbrook, they're going to be missing key rookie Mitch McGary and role player Anthony Morrow for the next month. So I would say that, it's going to be difficult for them to be as dominant as they really were last season, but I don't think they're going to be totally incompetent, especially given that they've hung with the competitive teams that they've played thus far. They were able to hang with the Portland Trailblazers. They were leading most of the game against the Trailblazers, and then against the Clippers, they only lost by 3. So I would say that the competition level is going to be there for the Thunder. They just won't be as dominant. And I think that it's really because of Perry Jones that they've been able to keep up, with the opponents that they have. Perry Jones has scored 55 points between his last 2 games, including a career-high 32 against the Clippers. I would say his hot hand is really going to help, sort of smooth over the injuries that the Thunder have suffered, really. So I don't think they'll be totally, in a bad position. But I would say that, it just takes a little bit of caution, I would say.
I definitely say their season it's definitely hindered by these injuries, but they have an interesting group of guys who can pull through. Like Casey said before, Perry Jones, he's been playing very well so far. You have Serge Ibaka, Kendrick Perkins, very good big men who can help out, and Steve Adams, who's also a very good big man. They've all put up good numbers. They've helped their team beat a good Nuggets team at home. And soon they'll be getting back Reggie Jackson and Jeremy Lamb to return. So I feel like the way they're playing right now, they might win every other game. But once Durant and Westbrook can return, I still think they can secure at least the 3, 4, or 5 seed for the team overall.
And the one thing that's going to help the Thunder is that they're not just talented, they're well coached. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something that you can't always say about a powerhouse NBA team. I would say the fact that they're so fundamentally sound makes them so much safer in the long run. Without Kevin Durant and without Russell Westbrook, their offense doesn't totally fall apart. They're still a cohesive unit.
Definitely. They're one of the best teams that you could have where that happens and they'll still be playing very well.
Absolutely.
Now what about the Heat? Do you think that they could be better than the Cavs?
Well, I would say that the Cleveland Cavaliers, obviously, with the acquisitions they've made in the offseason, it's tough to write them off as, a team that's not going to be competitive, even though they did lose their opening game to the New York Knicks. The build-up to that game was so much bewildering.
So much
the fact that it was being hyped as the greatest sporting event.
But do you think it was the greatest sporting event because of LeBron?
Given that LeBron played like a monster, sucked out his talents, it's hard to say that this game was.
They wouldn't be having it if it was Kevin Love just playing for the Cavs. No hype for that.
Exactly, and all this hype just so they can lose by 5. Neither team broke 100 points. They lose 95-90 to the Knicks, a Knicks team that isn't really supposed to be a powerhouse team, even though they do have Carmelo Anthony. They're still not going to be, at the top of the Eastern Conference. Mm-hmm. I would say that it's remarkably disappointing the way that LeBron James has started for the Cleveland Cavaliers. But I would say that, that's more just because of the 3 star players, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, and LeBron James, figuring each other out, really. Because the Miami Heat, back in the days of Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, and LeBron James, it took them a while to adjust to each other's style of play as well. You remember Dwayne Wade, when their dynasty first got collected. Dwayne Wade said, if we lose 5 games in a row, it will be worse than 9/11. That's a direct quote from Dwayne Wade. And then what did they do within the first month? They lost 5 games.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show that even though a team will be loaded with talent, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to struggle through the entire time. I think the Cavaliers are absolutely going to find the rhythm, and when they do, they just simply out-talent everyone else.
I feel like it is the same thing as the process, as Casey said before, that the Heat went through while they were on the team, making sure how they're cohesive. Also with the bench, the Cavaliers made a bunch of different additions like Mike Miller to their bench this year, and so figuring out how to put them in, when to put them in, how long to put them in, will be very interesting to see as far as for the Cavaliers team. They definitely can win. And as far as the Heat this year, they have been playing pretty well so far without them. And they have Luol Deng, Sean Williams, who no one expected to be a very good player, and they still have Mario Chalmers and Cole. So, the Heat, without LeBron, could be very well. But I feel like the Cavs will eventually
definitely pick
get
it
in
up.
that rhythm.
The Cavaliers, the one major flaw that they've had has been mostly centered around LeBron and even Kevin Love's inability to shoot the three so far. So I would say, and that's something that's going to fix itself over time. That's the major glaring mistake, is that LeBron James has not shot very well. He didn't take very many shots at all during the opening game against the Knicks. He took double the amount of shots in the second game against Chicago. And so I would think that once the threes start to fall, once they start to get a little more comfortable with each other, the Cavaliers are simply going to outmatch everyone else.
Totally.
Absolutely. What about Julius Randle and his injury and how it affects the Lakers this season?
Well, the Lakers weren't going to be a particularly good team to begin with, but the one thing that they really had to look forward to was the development of number 7 overall pick Julius Randle out of the University of Kentucky. The one thing that they were going to be able to look forward to was him running this dribble drive offense with Jeremy Lin running the point. And then 13 minutes into his NBA debut, 13 minutes, he breaks his tibia and he's out for the season with surgery. There couldn't be a more crushing blow to a Lakers team that was really not trying to make the playoffs, because that's totally outlandish given the roster they have, but at least to find some semblance of competitiveness with a team that just added Carlos Boozer, just added Jeremy Lin. Kobe Bryant is back healthy. They were going to be a team that you were at least going to want to watch. And I think that Julius Randle going down with an injury, I mean, it opens up the door for Ed Davis to step up. It opens up the door for Ryan Kelly to continue to develop, given that he's coming into his sophomore season. But I mean, beyond that, it's just not the same team without Julius Randle.
I was watching the game, and it was just terrible just to see. You see this guy playing, he's putting his heart out, and especially the fact that he did so much training over the offseason. He was ready to make that start and just goes down immediately. And I really hope, and I think he can bounce back like Blake Griffin and a bunch of those guys who went out. But you never know with him. It could be another Sam Bowie story, which would be tragic. And he shows just so much potential, and it's just very disappointing to see a guy who made such a big impact at Kentucky by himself that first season come in, try and help out a Lakers team that's been struggling, and really just fall hard. It's not fun. There have been so many season-ending injuries this year, and it's just been terrible to watch all of them.
It's another injury in a long slew for the Lakers, really, because during the preseason, going into the season, you have Nick Young having surgery on his finger. He's missing time. Ryan Kelly has been out the last week or so with a sore hamstring. You have Steve Nash, who his career may be over now with nerve damage in his back. Wes Johnson missed time. Xavier Henry missed time. Jeremy Lin missed time in the preseason. All of these people have been grappling with these injuries. It's just tough to say that the Lakers are going to be winning much more than 25 games this year.
It's really deja vu for the Lakers, because this was the same problem they faced last year, which is injury after injury.
Right.
And their roster
this point,
can't help them at all.
At this point, they're just tanking for the lottery.
Yeah.
I can absolutely see them relying on the ping pong balls at the end of the season to.
They could pick up someone good.
Absolutely.
We'll
I think at this point, pack it in. The season will not be going
Season's
well
over.
for the Lakers.
No, definitely not. Also last week, the Giants won the World Series. Matt, what do you think? Are the Giants still a dynasty?
I think they're extremely close. Their team has been great. I mean, the whole even years winning thing is a little odd. But I mean, if they win, I think if they win one solid one with the roster that they have now, with guys like Hunter Pence, Joe Panic, Buster Posey, and those guys, if they can win with them, I will call them a dynasty. Bruce Bochy has been a fantastic manager, and I feel like he can keep this up for 5 to 10 years. And if he does, I would consider him one of the top managers of just baseball in general. They've just been a great team, a great hitting team, a great pitching team. Their team has just been phenomenal overall.
Absolutely.
Matt hit the nail on the head there, saying that the Giants have been able to win all these World Series titles while keeping their core together for the most part. It's a unique scenario where guys like Buster Posey, guys like Pablo Sandoval, Tim Lincecum, Matt Cain, Madison Bumgarner, all of these people have been on the team for several years. So I think that the fact that they've been able to keep their core group of guys together, it's sort of reminiscent of the Yankees of the late 90s, that they've been able to keep all of their key players together. I mean, Bruce Bochy has cemented his legacy as one of the most successful managers in baseball. I mean, the one thing that you need to do if you're going to go to the Hall of Fame as a manager is win titles. I mean, you saw it with Joe Torre in that, if you're able to win titles, all of a sudden you're a baseball genius.
Are you saying that Joe Torre isn't a good manager?
I mean, that's a conversation for another day. But, the fact that the one thing that people look at in terms of baseball managing is winning games, because no one really knows what the exact strategy is for every manager.
Absolutely.
That's the thing that people see the most. So Bruce Bochy, honestly, what can you say? He's been remarkably successful. Madison Bumgarner, I mean, Absolutely monstrous. He reminds me of Randy Johnson from the 2001 World Series and playoffs, where he got wins in games 6 and 7 to clinch it for the Diamondbacks. Bumgarner was absolutely outstanding.
And speaking of Bumgarner, it really is the stuff of legend. I remember, whenever I have talked to my grandparents about baseball, they would say, well, back in the 60s, Bob Gibson, Sandy Koufax, they pitched dominantly. And honestly, I think Bumgarner's up there, top 5 performances. And it's just been, it was remarkable, the amount of rest he had in that last game. In such a tough situation in Kansas City, trying to close them out. They were only down by 1 run, and Bumgarner just did not give up. And he just pitched through, and it's a performance for the ages, certainly, from Bumgarner.
What about the Royals? Do you think they can get back from this? Look what happened to the Rays after they made it.
That's very true. I mean, the Tampa Bay Rays missed the playoffs after they were in the World Series in 2008 against the Phillies. Then the next year, even though they did still have a winning record with 84 wins, they still struggled and they finished 3rd in the division. So I would say that the Tampa Bay Rays, are a good example for the Royals of what really not to do. You can't become complacent in the offseason. You have to still always be looking to improve. And I think that's going to be tough for the Royals because they're a small market team and they're not really known for their big spending. When the Yankees or the Dodgers fail in the playoffs, they simply go out and they spend. They get a new player. They get a new shiny toy in the offseason, be it through trade or the big name free agent. The Royals don't really have that sort of power. So because of that, I think they have to make smart moves and they have to look at where they failed during the World Series, which is honestly maybe retooling their bullpen and getting a big bat. Yeah. I think that if they're able to find these little key replacements, the Royals will be able to at least compete in the Central Division.
But I think for the Royals, what they have towards their advantage is the fact that they're in, well, not the best division, certainly. The Tigers are getting older as a team. The Indians and the other 3 teams are struggling in that division.
Minnesota and Chicago, they're going to toil at the bottom of the barrel for
a little while. And they're a relatively young team, which is good, but they need to keep their stars around. The problem with the Tampa Bay Rays is that they got rid of some of their guys like Crawford and Pena, Kazmir and Garza. And what that ended up hurting them in the long run because they didn't have enough rookie guys to really fill in and really take leadership. And so they just need to improve their offense. As Casey said, 1 good bat, even 2 good bats will be good. And maybe like 1 or 2 good starting pitchers. Their bullpen has actually been pretty lights out. They're 7, 8, and 9 guys. They get 1 more starting pitcher, which I think they can because of the fact that players are looking at this and saying, wow, they made it all the way to the World Series. If I can join their team, what can happen with me on the team? So I feel like they definitely have a very good potential to go back to the World Series. Maybe not next year, but within the next 5 years, maybe once or twice.
It's a long shot, but now that they've made the World Series, I can see them having a serious look at John Lester, which is something that they wouldn't really have been able to say had they lost maybe in the ALCS. Now that they are on the map for playoff contenders, I think that maybe they're going to be pressured a little more to spend in free agency. Moneyball is popularized now thanks to Billy Beane, but I think honestly, if you're the Royals, you have to take a look at a guy like Lester.
Maybe even get a good fielder, like a guy at shortstop like Troy Tulowitzki, who's going to be available soon. So, I mean, just 1 good bat, and I think they'll be very successful.
All right. And we will be right back with our last segment, which is Speak Up. For our last segment, we will all be discussing one topic in This Week in Sports. So, Matt, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Well, it looks like one of America's most treasured sports reputation is being tarnished by unnecessary violence once again. That's right. NASCAR is having a severe problem in keeping its drivers from sucker punching each other at the end of what seems to be every race. After this past week's race, where Brad Keselowski tail-ended Jeff Gordon, spinning him out of control and leading himself to 3rd place, with Gordon finishing 29th and dropping to 4th place in the Sprint Cup standings, everyone wanted to take a shot at the new bad boy of racing. Now, I know as we as Americans love a good sports villain, the Boz, John Rocker, A-Rod, Jean Girard, every athlete from a country that lacks emotion, but that doesn't mean NASCAR has to go full-on WWE to make headlines. I mean, rivalries are great, but at least be respectful about it. One of my favorite movies from last year was Rush. This movie was about Formula One super rivalry between James Hunt and Niki Lauda. Now, they might not have always gotten along, but there was still a huge level of respect between the 2 racers. If a sport like NASCAR turns into a scene out of Slapshot, then it will turn the focus away from the intrigue of drivers battling it out for hours on end to finish a race on top in a fair and competitive manner, even though seeing the Hanson brothers as race car drivers would be the greatest event in sports history. Save the intensity for the racetrack. There's still many laps left to be raced.
Currently, the way that the MVP system is set up, it is prime for quarterbacks and running backs to win every year. However, if you were to take the MVP award at its face value, then what is preventing J.J. Watt from winning? He, more than any other player on any other team, has the biggest influence and is the most valuable player for his team. There is no other dominant force in the NFL. He does it all. He has a receiving touchdown, an 80-yard interception return for a touchdown, 1 forced fumble, 3 fumble recoveries, 1 taken back for a touchdown. He is responsible for 18 points this year. He has 8.5 sacks despite being a double and triple teamed every down. He has more quarterback hurries and hits in one game than most players have all season. He is also the leader in every sense of the word. He is the type of person and a player that should be the face of the NFL.
Flyers defenseman Michael Delzato has made yet another lapse in judgment. But rather than it being deciding to pinch at the blue line leading to an odd man rush, or using one of his classic drop passes entering the zone on a power play that never, ever work, this time it was deciding to continually beg a porn star for dates. Yes, the Delzaster is now all over Twitter as adult film star Lisa Ann went off on a rant for the ages calling out the stud NHL defenseman for harassing her to set him up with women on the road. The two apparently dated briefly 2 years ago, then went their separate ways. Which, when you think about it, the timeline adds up, seeing as Delzato has forgotten how to score since 2012. But you can see how they could find common ground together, since neither one of them spends much time dressed in their line of work. Also, credit Ann for recognizing that, despite her admittedly limited hockey knowledge, MDZ is not exactly the best defenseman, putting stud in all caps in her tweet. And when Delzato blocked Ann on Twitter, things only got more hilarious. Because really, if he was half as good at blocking shots as he was at blocking porn stars on Twitter, he'd actually be a passable defenseman.
And that's it for our first episode of This Week in Sports. For Casey Bryant and Matt McNamara, I'm Sarah Parody. Have a good night.